In many houses, the evening remained familiar. A glass of milk still warm on the table, a bowl of unfinished noodles, the bedroom door slightly ajar, the hallway light cast down on the clean tiled floor. No screams, no warning, only an unusual silence, as if the rhythm of life had been cut off midway. But behind those doors, sometimes the destroyer was not a stranger. It was the children themselves. People once asked, what could cause a 16-year-old girl, the beautiful daughter of a pastor, beloved by the whole town, not only to approve a plan to kill her own family, but also to stand and watch as her mother was struck with a samurai sword, her young brothers slaughtered in their beds, all for the sake of a boy she barely knew? If there is a detail in these stories that makes you stop, leave a comment. Because sometimes what you notice may be different from what others overlook. And if you want to continue opening the files that remain unfinished, subscribe to Unseen True Crime Documentary. We will go deeper into cases where the family is no longer the safest place. August 2013, Aurora, Colorado. A two-story house, green lawn, known by neighbors as a quiet Asian family. The mother, Yunmi Hoi, called Yumi, lived with her 18-year-old daughter, Isabella Guzman. Frequent arguments, mostly about school, discipline, and friends. Neighbors heard doors slamming, hurried footsteps, but they considered it the usual sounds of a family with a teenager. No one thought that just a week later, the house would become the scene of a case that shocked the entire country. August 28th, afternoon. The mother returned home, carrying grocery bags. The stepfather was also present, later reporting that Isabella said nothing, only giving a tense look. A day earlier, Isabella had sent a letter to her mother. You will pay. The letter was kept in the file as a forewarning piece, but at the time, no one considered it a real threat. The mother, as usual, put away food, checked the bathroom, prepared for the evening. The bathroom door closed, locked from inside. And then the first scream was heard. The stepfather recounted. He heard noises, the mother's calls for help, the rush of water. When he tried to open the door, he saw only the spread of blood. He ran outside, calling neighbors to dial 911. Police arrived within minutes. But inside, the scene was already complete. The mother had been stabbed dozens of times, a total of 79 wounds. A harsh number, recorded in the forensic report. Blood spattered across the white bathroom tiles, on towels, on the mirror. The daughter, Isabella, had left the scene before police arrived. The manhunt began that night. Police received a report from a citizen who saw a young girl wandering near a park. When they closed in, Isabella did not resist. The image of the girl with long hair, wide open eyes, an expressionless face was entered into the file. During interrogation, she did not express remorse. The recording shows a flat voice, cold, with long silences. When asked the reason, she answered only in fragments. I had to do it. That was not my mother. A repeated statement, prompting investigators to note in the file. Delusional hallucination, separation from reality. The initial indictment charged first-degree murder. But in court, psychiatric reports were introduced. Doctors concluded she suffered from severe mental illness. Hearing voices, believing her mother was possessed by another force. Testimony recorded in medical files stated she believed she was killing a demon. In the 2014 trial, the judge accepted the conclusion of not guilty by reason of insanity. Instead of prison, Isabella was transferred to the Colorado State Mental Hospital for compulsory treatment, indefinite in length. The media erupted. Images of Isabella in court, distant gaze, fleeting smile, spread across headlines. Public opinion divided. One side saw cold danger. The other debated the system's failure to detect mental disorder earlier. The stepfather, in an interview, stated briefly, she had been gone long before that night. His words read as an acknowledgement that the perpetrator was no longer the daughter they had raised. In the years that followed, hospital records show Isabella filed multiple petitions for release review. Reports noted improvement, cooperation in treatment, but each time the court denied. The reason, risk of relapse, could not be excluded. To this day, she remains there, behind white walls, where time is measured by medication and therapy sessions. The house in Aurora changed owners, but in the memory of neighbors, they still recall the night police lights flashed without pause, shining across the front lawn, where a family had once been seen as ordinary. The case closed with a question without an answer. What line divides illness and malice? An 18-year-old girl, a handwritten letter, a blood-soaked bathroom. In silence, the remaining objects, the mirror, the towel stained red, became the final witnesses. And when the hospital doors closed behind her, the emptiness in the Aurora house was never filled. Elsewhere, half a world away, it was also a letter, also lies that were believed. But this time, not in a family fractured by illness. It was by calculation that lasted for years. When the Aurora house closed with the sound of blood in the suburbs of Toronto, another house remained lit. Inside, a daughter regarded as dutiful was preparing the greatest performance of her life. A performance where the only audience was her own parents. In the suburb of Markham, Ontario, a red brick 3-bedroom house stood on a quiet street. The Pan family was seen as the model of successful Asian immigrants. The father, Han Pan, worked in the auto industry. The mother, Bitch, called Bisha, managed the household finances. They were known as strict, frugal, and full of expectations for their 2 children. The eldest daughter, Jennifer, 24, was viewed by neighbors as gentle and polite. The mother often spoke proudly of her daughter's academic achievements, nursing degree, and upcoming career opportunities. All of it was built from lies. In reality, Jennifer had dropped out of high school, never entered university, and held no qualifications. She lived in 2 worlds. One, before her parents, as the exemplary child, the other, behind them, as a series of fabrications, forged documents, and a hidden relationship with Daniel Wong, a boyfriend forbidden by her parents. Family tension accumulated over years. Investigation journals later showed Jennifer feared exposure, while at the same time nurturing an intent to escape control by any means possible. On the night of November 8, 2010, the house remained lit. A neighbor's camera recorded Jennifer walking in and out, texting continuously. Outside, three unfamiliar men approached the door. Around 10 p.m., gunshots rang out. The mother, Bitch, collapsed on the spot, struck by a fatal shot. The father, Han, was shot in the face and shoulder, but survived against the odds. Jennifer, her hands loosely tied on the staircase, was the first to call 911. Her panicked voice was recorded. "Someone broke in. They shot my parents." Police arrived at the scene, noting what resembled a violent home invasion. But some details did not align. The knots on Jennifer's wrists were too loose, leaving no marks. The alarm system had not been triggered. The doors showed no sign of forced entry. During interrogations, Jennifer repeated the same story, as if rehearsed. Investigators uncovered text message records from her phone. She had been in constant contact with her boyfriend Daniel and the unknown men, planning the act weeks in advance. Phone evidence became the key element. When her father, Hanpan, recovered in hospital, he recounted the intruder's final words. They shot only the parents, leaving Jennifer untouched. That reversed the hypothesis. The one behind it was not a robber. It was someone inside the house. Jennifer was arrested along with Daniel Wong and three other accomplices. The trial lasted months. Prosecutors presented SMS records in which Jennifer agreed to pay $10,000 to eliminate her parents, later altered to stage a robbery. The jury listened to the 911 recording, compared it with physical evidence, and concluded the scene had been staged. Jennifer was sentenced to life imprisonment with no parole eligibility for 25 years. Daniel Wong and the accomplices received similar terms. In the courtroom, Jennifer wore a pale shirt, hair tied back, showing no emotion. When the sentence was read, she only bowed her head. Her father, Hanpan, though he survived, declared to the court that he did not wish to see his daughter again. Her mother, Beach, was gone forever. In 2023, the case resurfaced in legal files when the Ontario Court of Appeal ruled that the jury had been misdirected on the charge of first-degree murder. Jennifer and her accomplices were resentenced under revised charges, but imprisonment continued. There was no substantive change. Today, Jennifer Pan is in Grand Valley Institution for Women. Public records describe her as a low-disruption inmate, participating in prison classes. Outside, debate persists. Was it the product of family pressure or cold calculation? The red brick house in Markham still stands, now occupied by others. But in the memory of the community, it is no longer a symbol of a successful family, but the scene of ultimate betrayal. Among ordinary household objects, the dining table, the staircase, the sofa, a staged performance unfolded, directed by the daughter herself. The case closed not only with a life sentence, but with an irreparable void. A family severed from within, where trust had turned into gunfire and blades. There are other houses where gunfire erupted in the morning itself. No text messages, no staged plans. Only a sudden explosion from the hands of a child. In a small Idaho town, a family of 3 ate breakfast in silence. Minutes later, on the staircase, only the echo of 2 shots remained. September 2003, Bellevue, Idaho. A quiet mountain morning, the Johnson family's 2-story house stood at the end of a deserted road. Alan, 46, a construction contractor, and his wife Diane, 52, an energetic woman working in real estate, usually began their days early. They had a 16-year-old daughter, Sarah, described by friends as striking with blonde hair, often seen at school as a cheerleader. From the outside, the family looked like a postcard of small-town life. Stable, comfortable, respected. On the morning of September 2nd, around 6 o'clock, explosions rang out upstairs. Neighbors later testified they heard sounds like fireworks. Then silence again. Inside the Johnson home, the scene was different. Alan collapsed at the bedroom doorway, shot in the chest. Diane was shot while still in bed, the wound piercing her head. A .264 Winchester rifle, usually kept in the garage, was found abandoned, not wiped clean. Police arrived within minutes. The 911 call came from Sarah herself. She stated that she had just woken up, heard the shots, saw her parents fallen, and fled in panic to a neighbor's house. Her shirt bore no blood. Her hands showed no injuries. At first, the theory leaned toward an intruder, but the doors showed no forced entry. No household items were missing, and the rifle belonged to the family. From then, suspicion shifted to the only remaining member inside the house. Investigators uncovered several notable details. Sarah had clashed violently with her parents over a relationship with an older man. Alan and Diane strongly opposed it, even forbidding her from continuing. In phone records and friends' statements, Sarah had often voiced anger, threatening to make them pay. On the evening before the murders, neighbors saw Sarah arguing loudly with her parents in the yard. All of it became pieces that could not be dismissed. During interrogation, Sarah denied involvement. She claimed she had been asleep in her room, waking only after the shots. But forensic testing showed gunshot residue on her clothing, faint but sufficient to raise suspicion. Experts concluded close-range fire, angle consistent with the rifle being held by someone standing directly nearby. Indirect evidence accumulated, the motive of conflict, the family weapon, no intrusion, the residue. The trial opened in 2005. Prosecutors described Sarah as an angry teenager, ready to eliminate her parents to be free with the forbidden relationship. Defense attorneys argued there was no direct witness, and Sarah never confessed. They emphasized the possibility of an unknown intruder who fled. But the jury was not convinced. After days of testimony, they convicted Sarah Johnson on 2 counts of first-degree murder. The sentence was read 2 life terms without parole. Sarah, upon hearing the verdict, kept a rigid face, without tears. Relatives in the back rows remained silent. Local newspapers described the trial as a shock to the small community, where everyone knew each other. They struggled to believe that the blonde cheerleader had become the one who killed her parents inside her own home. Years later, the case continued to be mentioned as laws changed regarding life sentences for juvenile offenders. Sarah's attorneys appealed, requesting reconsideration of her sentence. In 2021, the court reviewed but upheld the original punishment. The reason recorded in the decision, the severity of the crime and the weight of the evidence, was sufficient to prevent alteration. Sarah Johnson remains incarcerated in Idaho, with no possibility of release in the near future. The Johnson family home was sold. New occupants moved in. But in the memory of Bellevue residents, it remained tied to that blood-stained morning. Gunfire erupted before dawn had broken, leaving a small town to ask itself, what turned a 16-year-old girl into a parent killer? No answer came, and no chance remained to hear a confession. Only the cold wooden staircase, where the father collapsed, and the empty bedroom, where the mother was shot in her sleep. In Sarah Johnson's file, a quiet morning was cut short by gunfire, leaving 2 bodies inside the house that should have been the safest place. A 16-year-old turned into a lifer. But not all eruptions came with rifles. In a wooden cabin in North Carolina, 11 years later, silence was shattered. Not by repeated blasts, but by a single handgun shot, and later by a wooden chest placed in the shed. Inside, the father's voice would never be heard again. Winter 2014, rural North Carolina. A wooden cabin stood among sparse trees. The simple home housed only 2 people. Michael Howell, 50 years old, and his 17-year-old daughter, Crystal Brook Howell. The father lived plainly, often returning late from work, neighbors rarely hearing noise from the cabin. They knew Michael loved his daughter, though the bond had grown distant after his wife's death years earlier. Crystal, a teenager with blonde hair tied high, went to school, sometimes brought friends over. No one imagined that in the small cabin, the forest's silence would turn into a chilling void. On February 2nd, 2014, Crystal took her father's handgun. According to the file, Michael was sitting in the living room. There was no violent argument, no shouting. A single shot rang out, striking his head, ending life instantly. Crystal did not call 911, did not run to the neighbors. She dragged the body into a room, attempting to conceal it. In the shed behind the cabin was a large wooden chest. She opened the lid, placed the body inside, closed it. The chest became an unintended tomb, while the cabin lights stayed on as if nothing had happened. In the days that followed, Crystal invited friends to the cabin. They stayed overnight, ate, drank, listened to music, while her father's body lay silent inside the chest. Some later recalled that the cabin carried a strange odor, but they assumed it was the mustiness of wood. Crystal showed no signs of concern. She used her father's credit card, continued spending as usual. Outside, The forest remained windless. The cabin remained lit, and silence continued to conceal. 6 days later, a friend visiting the house happened to open the chest in the shed. Inside, they saw a blanket covering the body, the smell of decomposition no longer hidden. The friend immediately contacted police. When authorities arrived, Crystal did not deny it. She was arrested on the spot. In her first statement, her voice was flat, without tremor. "I shot my father." Investigators noted the unusual calm of a 17-year-old girl speaking of her own act. The indictment charged first-degree murder and concealment of a corpse. During interrogations, Crystal explained that she felt controlled by her father, that she felt she had no freedom. But no evidence of abuse or coercion was found. Prosecutors argued the act was carried out deliberately, not impulsively. She had hidden the body, continued daily life as if nothing had occurred. The file recorded no display of remorse, no tears. The trial took place in 2016. Crystal pled guilty to avoid the death penalty, accepting a minimum of 30 years in prison. In the courtroom, she wore an orange prison uniform, sat still, eyes fixed on the floor. Michael Howell's relatives were present. None gave lengthy statements. The sentence closed in silence. The court ruled: first-degree murder, concealment of a corpse. The penalty, 3 decades behind bars. After the trial, the wooden cabin was abandoned. The wooden chest, the heaviest piece of evidence, was removed. Neighbors walking past the dirt road leading to the house saw the silent cabin, locked doors. In their memory, the cabin had once been a home for father and daughter. Now it was tied only to musty odor and the image of a sealed chest. In the official record, the final line states, Crystal Brook Howell, born 1996, crime committed at age 17, incarcerated at North Carolina Correctional Institution for Women, eligible for parole after 30 years. The story closed with a number, but in the community's memory, it remained open. A teenager who shot her father, hid the body in a chest, and continued her days in the cabin as if his presence had been nothing more than an item put away. In cold Wisconsin, another house also fell silent after breakfast. On the table remained bread and a glass of water. But in the bedroom, the sound of knives and gunfire permanently ended the arguments between a 17-year-old girl and her parents. March 2015, rural Wisconsin, still covered in thin snow. A small wooden house stood among sparse trees where the Ayers family lived quietly. Inside were 5 people: Jennifer, the mother; Thomas Ayers, the stepfather, and 3 daughters. Ashley, 17, was the eldest. At school, friends knew Ashley as intelligent but quiet, writing blogs, sometimes expressing darkness in her poems. She lived under strict control and silent domestic violence. In later files, neighbors testified they had heard arguments, but thought nothing beyond the ordinary. On the morning of March 7th, the house remained lit, breakfast unfinished on the table. Ashley argued violently with her stepfather. Words turned into threats. In the bedroom, she took a hunting rifle and fired directly at him. The blast rattled the window glass. Thomas collapsed instantly, shot in the head and chest. Her mother, Jennifer rushed forward. In the chaos, Ashley struck with a knife, stabbing repeatedly. The fatal wounds brought the mother down before she could call for help. In the small house, the three younger sisters were locked in a room, hearing noise, cries, then silence. Ashley bolted the door from the outside, leaving them. She took the car, drove off with her older boyfriend, leaving behind a sealed scene. More than a day later, police came to check, finding two bodies and the children locked inside, trembling but alive. On the dining table, bread remained, a glass of water unfinished. The investigation moved quickly. Ashley was arrested in Indiana, found with her boyfriend. She did not resist, did not deny. In her statement, Ashley said she could no longer endure the emotional and physical abuse from her stepfather, and that her mother had failed to protect her. Short statements, flat, without tears. Prosecutors described the event as an eruption of violence, gun, knife, and the silence that followed. The forensic file recorded: Thomas died instantly from gunshot wounds. Jennifer from multiple stab wounds. The scene inside the house was described as a violent interruption of everyday life. The living room had the television still on, the kitchen still cluttered with breakfast. Only the bedroom had turned into a place no one dared to step into. The 2016 trial. Ashley pled guilty to 2 counts of second-degree murder in exchange for avoiding a heavier sentence. Defense attorneys emphasized the prolonged abuse, her juvenile age, and unstable state of mind. Prosecutors argued the act had gone beyond any claim of self-defense. The final sentence, 23 years in prison and 17 years of supervision after release. In the courtroom, Ashley wore a gray prison uniform, her hair tied back. She stood still as the judge read the sentence, showing little expression. Remaining family members said nothing. The local paper published Ashley's photo with the headline, 17th Birthday in Darkness. It was the day she lost both parents, her freedom and her youth, all in a single morning. Afterward, Ashley was transferred to Techida Correctional Institution for Women, where she continued to write. Prison records noted her participation in classes, little disruption. But the 23-year sentence was a figure unlikely to change. Outside, the Ayers family's wooden house still stood, silent, windows shuttered. Townspeople passing by often avoided looking, as if the memory remained visible. In the file, small details remained. 3 children locked in a room, a glass of water left on the table, the television still glowing. An ordinary morning cut short by gun and knife, ending with a 17-year-old girl behind bars. The case closed with a specific sentence, but left behind a void without answer. Was it revenge for abuse, or simply murder? No one knew for certain. Only the small house remained, where daily life was buried with 2 bodies and a youth erased. 5 houses, 5 unfinished mornings and evenings. A glass of milk still warm on the kitchen table. A hastily written letter left on a pillow. The wooden staircase where the father collapsed. The sealed wooden chest in the shed. The dining table still with bread and a glass of water untouched. Each house looked ordinary from the outside, but inside, parents fell by the hands of the very children they had raised. Not strangers, not shadows outside the door, but a void within the family itself, unseen until it was too late. If there is a detail that makes you pause, leave it in the comments. Because sometimes what you notice may differ from what others miss. And if you want to continue opening the files that remain unfinished, subscribe to Unseen True Crime Documentary. Because safety is not always in the locked door, but in truly knowing who is sitting at the table inside your own home.